freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome. You are listening to What on Earth is Happening. This show will discuss the topics of human consciousness, mind control, natural law, the occult, and all issues that affect the freedom of the people of Earth. What on Earth is Happening will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Passio.
Welcome, one and all. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on the Oracle Broadcasting Radio Network. I'm your host, Mark Passio. Today is Sunday, March 18th, 2012. My website is whatonearthishappening.com. The network's website, oraclebroadcasting.com. The show is live every Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. East Coast time. That's 4 to 6 p.m. Central. We have a great show lined up for you here today. Today is a special edition of What on Earth is Happening. It is episode number 100. It's a milestone for this radio program. And as part of the 100th radio show for What on Earth is Happening, I wanted to do something a little bit special, a little bit out of the ordinary. And instead of continuing to cover, the outline that I developed for solutions for the topics that we had planned for solutions, I want to bring on a very special guest today, my friend Jay Parker, who is going to talk about solutions-oriented approaches for ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control. Jay, you may remember, was one of the speakers at the Free Your Mind conference back in 2011, and he did a phenomenal presentation there that enlightened a lot of people. You could check that out on YouTube. You could also look it up at freeyourmindconference.com. Go to the speaker page, click on Jay's link, and you could watch the entire presentation. Jay came on this radio program as Neo before he came forward under his actual name to speak at the Free Your Mind conference. So many of you will remember him from show number 17, where he discussed satanic ritual abuse and trauma-based mind control. Today, we're not going to rehash all of that horror. We're going to stay focused on solutions and what people who may have gone through some type of extreme trauma like this can do to basically psychologically heal themselves. So that's coming up on the show today, and I'm really looking forward to it. I do have one quick event announcement, and that is regarding Truth, Freedom, Prosperity's monthly documentary screening and discussion night that's coming up, as it always does, on the last Wednesday of every month. Wednesday, March 28th, 2012 at 7 o'clock p.m. Note the time change, 7 p.m. instead of 7:15. We're meeting, as always, at Media Bureau Studios here in Philadelphia. Media Bureaus is in the Northern Liberty section of the city, on the corner of 4th and Brown, the exact address 725 North 4th Street in Philadelphia. This month, we're going to be showing the great documentary Slavery by Consent. Slavery by Consent is a documentary that exposes how we are seen as nothing more than chattel by the entrenched rulers of the global control system. It also explains how humanity ultimately enslaves itself by giving our consent to be ruled by these psychopaths and agreeing that we must somehow obey their dictates. Our true power will only be found when we develop the courage to stand up and emphatically say no once and for all to human slavery. But will we? Join us for this great documentary, Slavery by Consent, Wednesday, March 28th. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Oracle Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Today on the show, we have a very special guest as kind of a celebration of our 100th episode. And that special guest is Jay Parker. Here's his bio. Jay was born into a multi-generational satanic Illuminati family and received monarch trauma-based mind control as a child. For the first 7 years of his life, Jay was subject to satanic ritual abuse in a large cult setting. On the show today, I'll be discussing with Jay some holistic recovery and healing methods for satanic ritual abuse survivors, among many other topics. Jay, welcome back to What on Earth is Happening.
Well, it's great to be here, Mark. Your 100th show. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you being here.
Well, in the time since I did the What on Earth is Happening show number 17, and today, I have to say that my healing is gone very well.
That's really great to hear. I'm sure people will be really happy to hear that, and they're going to be also anxious to hear about how what kind of techniques and methods you've used to accomplish that coming back to balance psychologically and spiritually. We're going to be talking about that and getting in depth on those methods on this show today. But before we do that, one of the things that I would like to briefly talk about and get your take on is the occult season of sacrifice. And this is something that I talked about fairly extensively on What on Earth is Happening in the past. And the reason I mention it is because tomorrow, I would say, is the unofficial beginning of that season, with March 22nd, 3/22 being the actual real official beginning of that occult season of sacrifice. Now, I talked about this concept on shows number 51 and 52. So if people are not familiar with what the season of sacrifice is, I'm not going to completely go over it again. I've put the three images that I discussed on shows 51 and 52 on the radio show page for this show. So if you don't see that, you can refresh the page. It's right underneath the player on the radio show page of What on Earth is Happening, or it is posted with Podcast 100 if you're listening to the podcast. So those three images are showing the occult calendar, the calendar of the Sabbats, the midpoints of each season, and then explaining why the spring equinox is seen as an extremely special time, kind of like the renewal of the year when the sun breaks the midpoint or the 0 degree point of its the Earth's plane of orbit. The sun, of course, due to the Earth's plane of orbit, is visually seen to go from 23.5 degrees south latitude of the Earth to 23.5 degrees north latitude of the Earth, depending on the time of the year. And the midpoint or 0 point of that is the spring equinox and also the autumn equinox. But it is seen to be rising during the spring equinox, signaling a time of rebirth and renewal. But also, in the dark occult sense, this is a time of sacrifice when blood is to be given to the earth and to the sun in order that a bountiful harvest may be received during harvest season. So that's the short explanation of what the season of sacrifice is. And if you look at these three images, it basically explains that this is a 40-day period, 40 being a very significant symbolic occult and biblical number, from 3/22 or March 22nd to May 1st, which is the midpoint of the spring season, which is the Sabbath known as Walpurgisnacht. Walpurgisnacht happens on May 1st, and it is the highest occult holiday of the year. So if you look into history and you look at false flag operations and you look at covert sacrifice rituals done in the name of showing people how horrible these things are and that we have to do something, to gain control over this situation, like school shootings and bombings and terrorist events, etc. A high percentage of them take place during this 40-day window. And just a very brief example, I'm sure I'm forgetting tons of them. I just compiled this quickly right before the show. The BP oil spill happened on April 20th. Waco, the siege at Waco occurred on April 19th. The Oklahoma City bombing happened on April 19th. The Columbine school shootings happened on April 20th. The assassination of Martin Luther King happened on April 4th. The Virginia Tech school shootings happened on April 16th. The massacre at Port Arthur happened on April 28th, all within this 40-day window that is known as the season of sacrifice. So one of the things I want to start off talking about is that this season is getting ready to open up. As a matter of fact, I would say that the unofficial season is March 19th, okay, which starts tomorrow. That's 3 days before the official opening of this season, which is March 22nd. Okay, and that's another symbolic reason. The 3 days before the official rising, that the sun is dead as of March 19th, and then finally really truly breaks the horizon of the 0-degree latitude mark on the 22nd of March, 322. Again, another symbolic occult number, and it is highly associated with the dark occult organization known as the Skull and Bones, the Order of Skull and Bones, or the Order of Death. So this season is something that we have to be vigilant during, especially so, not to say we don't need to be vigilant during other times of the year, but especially during this season. So I'm putting out a call for people to be on the lookout for false flag events, for fake terror events, for bombings and shootings, etc. Okay, or justifications to go to war. They're constantly they've been trying to push to go to war in many different areas. Okay, Iran not the least of which. Africa now with this Coney situation, that they're trying to flaunt out there when this person hasn't really been a threat in Africa for years, and they're trying to trot that out in front of people to justify going to war in the Uganda region of Africa. So the situation, the actual time of this year is ripe for a false flag event, and we really need to be extraordinarily vigilant during this time in particular. So, Jay, I want to turn the floor over to you before we start getting into satanic ritual abuse and healing methods for it. I want to get your take on the occult season of sacrifice, knowing that you came from an occult family. Tell us what your take is on that and what you think we should be on the watch for.
Well, growing up in my family, everything, in the religion, basically, all about it. Valpurgis Night, all the different holidays, different rituals. But, there we go.
We're going to pick this up on the other side of the break. I know this break just got us. It snuck up on us. But I'll turn the floor over to you when we come back from the break, and you can tell us what your position is on the season of sacrifice and, what you think we should be looking out for, some of the things that you think they might try. They might try to sneak in past us during this time that they look at as they must give blood to the earth in order to get their manifestation to take place. We'll pick that up on the other side. Stay with us, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Mark Passio, and you're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on the Oracle Broadcasting Network. My special guest, satanic ritual abuse survivor Jay Parker. We're going to be getting into healing methodologies for SRA, satanic ritual abuse, a little bit later on the show. But I open up the show with a warning to people that we're about to enter the time period known as the occult season of sacrifice, which I covered rather extensively on podcasts number 51 and 52. I went into a list of events that happened during that season, and I turned the floor over to Jay. Tell us what your take is on the occult season of sacrifice, and maybe perhaps what we should be on the lookout for during that time period.
Well, when it came to the cult I was in, my father claimed to be ninth generation Illuminati, and that his family was in the Illuminati since the 1720s. Basically, the entire first 7 years of my life, every time you turned around, there was some sort of ritual or special holiday. I mean, it's very much like the Catholic Church. Every time you turn around, it's some saint's feast. Most of the time, they didn't need a reason to kill somebody for, let's say, Halloween. They did what they did based on religious practices that go back for them probably 3000 BC. So when I look at my, let's say, early spring memories of being in the cult, to me it's the same. It was the same as any other time. Whether there was always raping and torture, but if there was a human sacrifice to be done, it meant it wasn't really that big a difference for them to do it May 1st or to do it during the equinox, the summer solstice. They didn't need an excuse, a reason. They would kill people all year long. They would rape people all year long. But when it comes to what you're talking about with the season of sacrifice, that's where you get into the Illuminati mind control manipulation of society in general. And then,
so this is an event on a mass scale, done to push consciousness in a certain direction on a mass scale.
Well, when you talk about mass consciousness manipulation, my favorite story in my family was watching the JFK funeral with my mother, father, and two brothers. And my father saying to my mother that he had just finished talking to the head of our town cult. And he said to my mother, "This is a ritual. It's called the death of a king. And we did this. And the driver of the limo was our man." And I'm just saying, and
this
is
is
like the death of Diana.
This is something, the killing of the king or queen is something that I talked about. If people go on the news section of my website, I got into this with Bob from Cincinnati when he brought me on his show, Occult Empire, a couple of months ago. And we briefly discussed the ritual known as the killing of the king. I'm not sure if I went into that during the season of sacrifice shows or not. I can't quite remember. But I do know I touched upon this topic on Occult Empire with Bob from Cincinnati, and you could check that out. That was a show that was actually on the alchemical tradition, alchemy, that I did with Bob on Occult Empire a couple months ago. You could check that out in the news section of the What on Earth is Happening website. But Jay, you had mentioned another one during the break, just off the top of your head. You threw it out there. The battles of Lexington and Concord actually happened on this date, April 19th. It seems that for mass killing, for mass murder, this date is so favored. April 19th and April 20th seem to be extreme favorite dates in the mindset of these dark occultists. Do you want to touch on that?
Well, of course, April 20th is Adolf Hitler's birthday. So you always have to try to give kudos to the master of eugenics on his birthday.
Yeah, I can see why these eugenicists would want to sort of, tip their hat, in other words, in a very sick and twisted way. So these dates in particular, April 19th and 20th, absolutely be keeping your eyes open during that. We'll talk more about it as it approaches. But again, I consider the unofficial beginning of this season to be tomorrow. So that is what I would consider really the opening of the season of sacrifice is March 19th. So I guess, that's really all I wanted to say about that, and just put it out there for people to really, really be aware of it. Don't obsess over it. Study it. Understand that this is the mindset of these twisted psychopathic individuals that are the occultists who are really running things in the power structure of our world. But this is their belief system. You know, I'm not telling you that there is any kind of special magic that occurs because they can find a way to manipulate a situation where thousands, hundreds or thousands of people are killed during a certain time of the year. What I am telling you is that that's what they believe. They believe that and are certainly willing to act upon that belief system. So it's important to understand their beliefs and keep an eye out during this time of the year. So let's move on and start getting into satanic ritual abuse healing methods. The first thing I want to ask you is, what helped you to come out of the condition that you were in as a result of all the trauma and abuse that you suffered during your childhood? What did you specifically do, or what happened to you to help you start to bridge that gap psychologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually? Tell us, what basically led you from that condition of deep imbalance, pain, and suffering to the condition that you're in today, being an awake and aware individual.
Well, it's a journey of, thousands of steps, and one step builds onto the platform of the previous step, and you rise up out of the mind control. I have to say that because of the adage, birds of a feather flock together, many of my friends were abuse victims. And so one of the things that helped wake me up was that one of my close personal friends was a satanic ritual abuse victim also. And he had woken up to the fact that he had been raped and tortured as a child. And he started reading books about it. And then he gave them to me because once he got enough understanding of his psychology, he took a look at me and said, "Oh, that's why we're good friends." Because subconsciously, we both had been through the ringer.
Interesting. Would you say that it would also have a great bearing upon whether someone starts to go in the direction of healing, the kind of people that they would choose to associate with, perhaps even after the direct trauma has been done to them?
One of the amazing things when I look back at when I first started my programming first started breaking down, one of the main reasons with this is I stayed away purposely from my father, who was my primary handler. Without him able to reboot my programming, it started to lose its power.
So physically removing yourself, if it is within your capability from doing that, if you know that this kind of abuse is being done to you, physically leaving the scenario, if you can muster the courage to do that, and if the cult that is doing this to you does not want to physically keep you held hostage in a physical way, physically removing yourself from that scenario is step one.
Absolutely.
We'll pick this up on the other side of the break. Our special guest today, Jay Parker. We're back, everyone. Our special guest today, Jay Parker, survivor of satanic ritual abuse, and we're talking about healing methods for SRA, satanic ritual abuse. Jay was saying that the first thing to do is to physically remove yourself from the circumstances of the cult, from the actual physical surroundings of the cult that you may be surrounded by. And this is obviously doable to a certain extent, depending on the nature of the type of cult that you're dealing with. This was possible to an extent for you. Many people are under such strong mind control that they can't mentally bring themselves to do that. But many people, I guess, some of their role in the cult setting is valuable enough to the cult members that they will not physically be allowed to do that. So if it is possible, that is the very first thing is, as Jay was talking about, this concept of people of like-minded consciousness will continue to breed that same consciousness. So it's very important to physically remove yourself from those surroundings. So Jay, do you want to touch anything more on that, or do you want to move on to the next technique?
Well, one thing I remember from that time of becoming aware of reality as opposed to my programmed mindset was the emotional horror of finally pulling the curtain back and starting to break through the amnesic barriers of the trauma and having body feelings and memories coming into my mind from what I had experienced as a child. And emotionally, it was really painful. But I was fortunate that in my own consciousness, that when I realized how I had been duped and used as a tool, of the cult, I was angry enough that I actually decided that I was going to get better from it. I wasn't going to wallow in the negativity. I was going to find positive things and heal myself. And because I understood enough about human life in general, that we are, to a basic extent, computers. And it's garbage in, garbage out. And whatever you're focusing your attention on, that's where your energy is going to be. And by reading healing books psychologically, and Fritz Springmeier's book on how to make a monarch mountain control slave was really helpful to me, because I was able to see the clinic way of looking at these rituals and understand the why and how of what I had experienced.
So quality of attention plays into this in a big way, and this is one of the things that we've already talked about on the show as one of the overarching solutions for how humanity can change its consciousness and heal its imbalances. So that plays a huge role in recovery from ritual abuse as well. What you pay attention to is ultimately what's going to manifest in your life. Of course, with mind control and mind control triggers, the kind that are embedded in trauma-based mind control, that could be an even taller order for people who are just, let's say, hooked on certain forms of media, or hooked on certain forms of frivolous entertainment. So that will obviously be a tall order for people who have been through this ringer of trauma-based mind control. But why don't we stay focused on that aspect of it for the time being, and talk about who are some of the influences, some of the people that you really kind of paid attention to help you to change your worldview and your mindset.
Well, all I have to say is thank God for the internet, and I have to say the process of one of the things that will happen when you're a monarch or you go through any cult abuse, and this goes for any quote unquote just off the beaten path religion. People are susceptible to emotional abuse and emotional manipulation in group settings. And all I have to say is, when I woke up, I had already, because of the web, had started to read books by authors that expanded my awareness of reality. Let's say I was a big fan, and still am, of Nassim Haramein. I like the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton when he talks about the epigenetic nature and the reprogrammable nature of human consciousness, both physically and mentally. And when I was fighting the, let's just call it the suicide programming of Monarch, because once you really put your foot down and say, okay, I see what this happened to me. I know who my abusers are. You'll go through a period of several months where this, and it's nothing more than suicide programming, where emotionally and mentally you'll be up against the wall, and your mind and body will be screaming at you, kill yourself. There's, don't try to heal from this. Just give up. Look at your whole life was a fraud, blah, blah, blah. And I just fought through that because of my understanding that I didn't know everything, and that there was a lot to learn and understand. I hadn't given up on life because of what had happened to me. I realized that I had been given an opportunity to literally reprogram myself.
Okay, so we talked about removal from the physical surroundings if that is within your capability to do so. The change in the quality of attention, who you pay attention to, what you focus your attention on, will redirect the manifestation that's taking place in your life. Let's move on to another technique. What would you say is the next most important thing to start to do to reverse the tide and heal the worldview and heal the psychological and the physical damage that has been done, as a result of the direct mind control techniques, particularly the trauma-based techniques?
Well, in the books I was reading a lot of psychology books based on trauma, both cult and non-cult sexual trauma. I was reading a lot of information based on the sciences and history, and just generally speaking, I had gotten myself into a conscious state where learning and understanding became an important thing to me. When I realized that my family was totally cult, and basically my brother, even my older brother, tried to reboot my programming at one point as I was pulling away. Okay? And when he did that, and I realized that not even my most beloved brother was my friend anymore. Now, most people, when that realization would hit them, they would be crushed totally. But for me, I realized from that it's something that I guess I had just read enough psychology to the point where I had developed some critical thinking skills of my own. And instead of being really, I was angry at my brother for being cult and trying to reboot my programming. But I also had read enough of Fritz Springmeier's work and some of the other trauma-based psychologists to understand that until people take a step back from their personal programming, whether it's trauma-based or whether it's religion or whatever it is, and look at it through critical thinking, they're nothing but prisoners of their programming.
So what you needed to realize in the instance with your brother is that he was simply a prisoner of his own programming and doing what his programming dictated. So part of your own healing was letting go of that resentment that he's still under the mind control, and you're coming out of it, and to basically let that anger go regarding the state of consciousness that he's still trapped in.
Well, absolutely. When that particular incident happened, although I was mad at him, I also had read enough that I had an understanding about basically the robotic nature of people who are programmed.
Would it be fair to sum up that basic aspect of as a technique for healing from this type of trauma? Would it be fair to group that under the category generally of forgiveness in general?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things you have to do is lighten up on yourself.
Absolutely. That's very important to basically look at things in a positive way. The power of positive thinking. That's something we're going to talk a lot more about in the future on this show. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Our special guest, Jay Parker. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on the Oracle Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Today on the show, our special guest, Jay Parker, survivor of satanic ritual abuse. We're talking about healing methodologies for people who have been put through this horrific form of trauma-based mind control. So, Jay, you were talking about the necessity for forgiveness for people that are still trapped in this kind of abusive setting and, are operating on, their automaton programming, and realize that really isn't the individual, that really isn't the true person, that's not the true individual, that's not their real soul. They're operating on under programmed conditions and circumstances that have been instilled there. That programming has been instilled there by trauma that they themselves went through. So I said, is that fair to call it as a general technique, practicing forgiveness? And your response to that?
Well, let's just talk about my oldest brother, that when he tried to reboot my programming under direction of my father, I just looked at him, and that's the last time I actually saw him physically, and that was over 10 years ago. And basically, when that incident happened and I realized he was in on it, I was extremely angry at him, but we had, as my programming was breaking down, I reached out to my brother to try to discuss some of the things I was remembering from our childhood. And my brother looked at me, and with tears in his eyes, he said to me, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to think about that time at all. I can't deal with it. And I said, I want to know what happened. I have these memories flooding back to me. I want to understand this. And so you go online, and some of the first memories that came back to me were sexual abuse, and also some of the training time that I actually spent alone with my parents, being told the true nature of reality in the world, that the Illuminati controlled the world, that we were an Illuminati family, and the things we did were because we were part of the power structure. And so then you start to search out Illuminati, secret societies. What are these things? What are these memories? And you start to read people like David Icke, and you start to go down the rabbit hole, and you start to study and research and try to find answers to the memories that you have, which that's what I did.
So would you say that wanting to look at what actually occurred is like a prerequisite for healing psychologically and mentally and emotionally? Can people, do you think that they can fully heal from this type of trauma if they refuse to admit what occurred and not look at it, not want to know all about what really happened and why? Is it possible for them to heal without doing that homework? Or is that a prerequisite? Is that something that people really need to, basically buck up and do that work, look into it, no matter how dark it is, to really fully recover?
I went through an interesting time, Mark, in the first several years of my recovery process, in that by reading a lot of books by mainstream psychologists and let's say abuse therapists and psychologists, I found that they had all I can say is a mentality of wallowing and of victimization, of constantly rehashing the trauma rather than reprogramming. And I don't know why. Maybe it's something in me, but I wanted an understanding, and then I wanted to release it, and then reach out and bring something empowering into me so that I would truly rise above what had happened to me.
So it's the idea, once again, of knowing, but not focusing on the negative. Knowing about it, knowing how it works, but not obsessing on the negative. There's so much negativity, and there's so many mind control techniques and dark things that are taking place in the world. If we obsessed on it, we would basically shut ourselves down, and we would never come into any kind of personal power or personal empowerment. We need to be aware of the darkness, which is why I spent a year and a half on mind control techniques, to make people aware of all the multifaceted techniques of mass control that are going on all around us at all times and places. But at the same time, we moved on from that because I don't want to just dwell on those things. We're talking about how we can set things right ultimately. Empowerment is what we want to focus on. We want to be aware of the dark, but then turn our attention to, well, what can we actually do to heal from those dark things that are going on around us? So it's absolutely important to keep in mind, be aware of the darkness, but don't dwell upon it and let it take over your everyday waking consciousness. There's a big difference between those things, and sometimes it could be a line to walk. You have so many people that constantly talk about all the negative that's going on, but never really bring up solutions. Well, what we do here as part of What on Earth is Happening is discuss solutions and what we can actually do practically and pragmatically to bring about a change in the current situation. So that's a very key thing there, Jay, and I'm glad you brought it up. So let's talk about some of the physical things. Like, I know you wanted to get into food and how the change of diet can really help with the change of mental attitude, worldview, and psychology as well. So what do you want to say in regards to what you did practically to change your physiology and what you were taking into your body, nourishing your body computer with, so to speak?
Well, one of the things I used to love to do in my life before I woke up was I loved to work really hard and party really hard. So I would drink after work practically every day. And one of the things I had to face as I woke up was that was a program in me to keep my subconscious memories and to keep what was stewing deep down inside me mentally from surfacing, was just have a drink, relax, forget about it. And so I stopped drinking to excess, and I started learning about nutrition, and I started realizing more and more from the scientists and philosophers I was reading that you're basically the sum total of your own personal knowledge. So if you're ignorant of something, you're not going to do yourself any favors. And this especially when we talk about diet, and this is a big issue with you, and you look at what's being fed to the human race today, one of the first things you can do to make yourself feel better and heal yourself is to stop eating GMO poison, to get away from aspartame, alcohol and drug abuse. You literally stop feeding the demons and start feeding the healing. And it takes a little more effort. And at times I have to say, I look at my organic diet now, and I'm not a chef, so it's somewhat bland, but that's the way I keep it, the price down, is I don't go crazy. I keep it simple. But I've noticed absolute changes in my physiology in the last 3 years, especially since I went totally vegan and organic. And I stay away from the garbage.
It really is a form of vibratory energy that we're taking in through our food. So how you put it is so appropriate. When people feed low vibrational food to their body, they're literally feeding demons that are controlling them, that are keeping them on that program, because that demon acts like a parasite. It wants that entity wants to feed on the low vibratory form of energy, and it wants you constantly down in your energy system so that it can stay latched onto you. Because if you get healthy and you get onto high vibratory energy foods, living natural foods, living organic foods, those energy vampires that are all around us are not going to feed. They can't stay and attached and feed off of that different vibrational energy through high quality food. So we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. This is What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. We're into the second hour of the show. Our special guest today, Jay Parker, we're talking about satanic ritual abuse and the methodologies for psychologically and mentally healing from this type of trauma-based mind control. And I want to give the call-in number because we're going to be taking calls this hour a little bit later in the program. So the call-in number is 866-841-1065. Once again, the call-in number 866-841-1065 is the number to call in and join us live. Be patient, get in the caller queue, and I will take your calls after we cover a couple more topics. So, Jay, do you want to wrap up on food and how important that really is to set the body right? The vibratory energy of the body ultimately needs to be in right harmonic vibration, oscillation, in order for the subsequent healing to take place mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And you want to talk about some of the people that helped you to really recognize that so that you could put that into practice in your life.
Well, when I first woke up, I had some fortunate things happen to me. Because of my situation in my life for many years being a zombie in the system, most of the people I worked with in business and in personal friends were either former abuse victims or in the Illuminati themselves. So I just want to tell this one little story because it deals with how I got to where I am today. There was a bar owner in the neighborhood here in Philadelphia, and I would go over to his bar and drink, and it had become known to most of the people that were in my circle of friends that I had realized that I was a traumatic abusive victim because I was talking to people who were close to me about what was going on with me. So it kind of got around the grapevine of the cult in Philadelphia that I had woken up. And so I went to this one guy's bar, and I'm sitting down and having a beer, and he looks at me, and I could tell that he was in the cult. I don't want to get into details with it, but let's just say he looks at me and he says, "Do you have a TV?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "It's really not good for you." And, you know, being an illuminist, he could have literally, you know, hurt me if he wanted to. But because he personally liked me and he heard that I was waking up, he decided instead of putting me down and stepping on me with his heel, he decided, the guy's got some consciousness in him after all. Well, I'll give him a little pointer, a way out of the maze. And I'll never forget him looking at me and saying, "That TV, it's really not good for you." And the way he said it to me was as a handler would give a point of direction to a slave.
Almost as if he was just outright admitting in very few words that they are the controllers of that device. They are the people who put the vibratory energy that they do out into the world through that device. And what the results of that kind of of consciousness intake of that type of information would be upon the consciousness.
Exactly.
All right, well, this is the short segment, so we'll pick it up on the other side of this break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Oracle Broadcasting Network. We'll be back with our guest, Jay Parker. We're back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. Our special guest today on the show, satanic ritual abuse survivor Jay Parker. We're talking about healing methods for SRA. And we covered several, and we were talking about food and how important it is to get on healthy organic foods, because that's vibratory energy that's also affecting consciousness, that's affecting our emotional makeup and our psychological makeup. And it's something I talked about extensively on the show. We did many programs on all the dangers and poisons that are in food, and we did many shows on what the right thing to do regarding food is. Jay was talking about television and how poisonous that form of intake of media is. And this is something we talked about in the change of quality of attention section as part of solutions to overall mass mind control. What it seems to sound like to me more and more is that a lot of the healing techniques for extreme traumatic mind control, such as Jay went through and many others have, they dovetail and go hand in hand with the solutions for mass mind control. They're basically doing the same thing to the person's consciousness, putting it under a form of control, of behavioral control. Okay, they're using different methods to do that. The methods are more subtle and long-term and chronic when it comes to mass mind control, but under trauma-based mind control, they're more extreme, and they're more highly focused, and they're done in shorter orders of time. It sounds like, though, the general solutions are basically very similar to each other. Jay, your comment on that, and then if you want to continue on food and quality of attention through cutting out television, go right ahead.
Well, I absolutely believe that no one should watch TV except for maybe one or two good entertaining programs a week. If you're watching TV more than 3 hours a week, you've got a problem. Physiologically, and what it does in bringing down your brainwave pattern, put you in a state of hypnosis so that the subliminals can be put into your subconscious. If you want to do that to yourself, good luck with that. One of the things that my healing process was fortunate to have was I was taught to be a reader. And so when I started waking up, I didn't do anything but try to get information. And the web has been a great tool, but also, hanging out with people like you, Mark, people who are actively using their entire life force to get to the truth about what the human race is here for. What are the big questions? What happens in our society is we're told to think small-minded and to think selfishly, and not to really get a big overview about history, philosophy, spirituality, what you're really here for. And fortunately, as I woke up, David Icke's books were really good in getting me to open up, because the Illuminati control system is a system of scarcity, and it's a system of, I wouldn't say just disempowerment, but it really is a small box that you live in, and you're not allowed to look outside that box.
Absolutely, and that's the thing that they continuously reinforce through their media, which is going to be enforced through the television. And that's what part of what holds people in such a small, limited perception of the reality in which they live in on a day-to-day basis. I want to comment on what you said about David Icke, because he was a researcher that really, really helped my awakening process as well. And for people that, have a lopsided or slanted interpretation of this man's work, I would say stop going on what you have heard from other people, or that you just watched in a 5-minute YouTube video. You need to sit down and read his books from the beginning, from the early ones. Start at his very first book, which was, I think, Truth Vibrations. He wrote another one that wasn't really about consciousness, that was about the Green Party movement. I think it was called It Doesn't Have to Be Like This, which is also an excellent book. His first book in what you can consider alternative information and higher consciousness was Truth Vibrations. And I would highly recommend people start reading his work from there, from his earlier books, and proceed to some of his later books that are much larger and jam-packed with even more information. But then you'll really get a sense of what a kind of researcher that man is, and how proliferous his work is, prolific his work is. I mean, the amount of research that he's put into even one of his books, you could research on those topics for a lifetime, because they're so well documented, and there's so many references provided, particularly in some of his larger books like And the Truth Shall Set You Free or The Biggest Secret. I mean, they could take you into thousands of topics on their own just from the endnotes from each chapter. So people who have a colored viewpoint of his work really should stop paying attention to hearsay, again, or what they've seen in a brief clip somewhere, and actually sit down and read what he has written over 20 years of his life through I think now 17 or 18 books, something like that. So that's what I have to say on that. Jay, we want to get into a couple other topics too. You wanted to talk about the trivium a little bit. You have emotional freedom technique was another healing modality that you want to direct people toward if they're not familiar with it or know about it, EFT. And I want you to tell the listeners about your work with Organite as well. So let's start with the trivium. What kind of work have you done regarding that, and how can people employ that?
Well, one of the things that happens to you as you start to read David Icke, and I think when it comes to understanding the mental faculties of being a human being, people like Kevin Trudeau and Dr. Bruce Lipton, their lectures have been indispensable healing tools for me. And I'm not saying that Kevin Trudeau and Bruce Lipton have 100% lock on truth or accuracy, but some of the concepts these men deal with on a daily basis and try to teach people, like epigenetic biology with Bruce Lipton, is that you are source programmable, and you can program yourself with positive things and make yourself happy. Or you can program yourself and keep feeding yourself garbage, and the garbage will manifest. It's your choice. It's individual responsibility. But I really think that, Andrew Grove and Jan Irvin with the Trivium have been real inspirational to me, as far as guys that are teaching about the ancient philosophy of critical thinking.
Absolutely, and that is one of the most important methods for truth discovery. So if you're going to get out of this parasitic worldview, and the worldview that's basically been leeching off of you, you have to have a methodology for discovering and understanding the truth. And the Trivium is, as you've said, indispensable in that regard. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. Our special guest on this episode of What on Earth is Happening, Jay Parker. We'll be right back after these words.
The Oracle broad.
You can't stop people with the kind of conviction to come out of a situation seemed so dire as satanic ritual abuse. And I'm glad to be joined by one of them right here today on this broadcast, Jay Parker. So Jay, we're going to continue talking about SRA healing techniques. You brought up the trivium. Where we want to talk about emotional freedom technique, or what is commonly known as EFT. And I want you to tell people about your research and work with Organite and some of the theories and technologies of Wilhelm Reich. So we'll get into that coming up, but we do have a caller on the line. Do you want to go to the phones and take a phone call?
Sure.
Great. Okay, here we go. Richard in Washington, you're live on What on Earth is Happening with our special guest, Jay Parker. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. My background is as a probation officer. I was trained, educated in physiological psychology, brain behavior. And through my career as a probation correction officer and counselor, what I found was there's a close connection between habitual behavior, which makes us as a human being very successful, and addictive behavior. And I've kind of challenged you before as far as, looking into what we consider to be food as possible addiction, especially to carbohydrates and grains. The vegetarian myth is a exposition by a vegan vegetarian who, when her health started to deteriorate, she really checked into it and found out the whole background of what was happening, not only in her condition, but in the world in general. I highly recommend that. Leora Keith is her name, last name Keith. And what you find, and just what I found in AA, is people go from an alcohol addiction to, say, an addiction to coffee, cigarettes, and donuts, and they're just trading addictions. And I don't want to sound insensitive here, but this seems to be somewhat about what you're talking about now. The personality, and we can take this on a spiritual level, the personality seems to want to just trade addictions without really acknowledging the fact that they've gone from the habitual positive aspect of things to the addictive losing sight of reality perspective. I'll give that as my opinion, and if you want to answer that and then ask me again for a little more input, I'd be happy to let you respond.
I'd actually like to talk to you a little bit more about the aspects of diet, but one thing I have to say is a well-rounded mental outlook has been one of the things that has really healed me. When the trivium gets you to really critically think about the information that you're being given, you start to look for the strings on the puppets in all aspects of your life. And you start to say, well, this person's telling me this, but is it because they're a organic vegetable seller? I mean, what's the motivation behind the people who are giving me information and I'm incorporating it into my worldview and into my life? And when you start to cut the strings of the puppets in front of you and make up your own mind and do your own research, then it becomes your life and your decision and your responsibility and your manifestation. And this is something that it literally took me 8 years to even get baby steps onto a platform of self-responsibility.
And Richard, I'm not really quite sure what, does what you were saying regarding that have to do with ritual abuse per se in particular? I mean, you were saying... Yeah.
Yes, there's been great points made, and that last one was an exceptionally great point. That's what I'm saying is possibly what you're mistaking for addiction and programming, and we all get programmed from youth. That's the nature of turning to adulthood, right. And I don't want to sound insensitive because
sure.
I can't put myself in another's shoes, and nobody knows their experience.
You mean for the other individuals I was referring to, like people who may still be in that mindset.
Right. But I do ask, and as part of the last good point was, due diligence partakes of taking opinions and in research from other sides of the perspective.
Sure.
And that's why I've challenged you, and I challenge the guest to read The Vegetarian Myth. This will give you a true perspective, and I call it the trivium. My background is in Latin rather than the trivium. Like, it's not trivial, it's a triangular perspective, three sides. And I just ask you to look at that and investigate the fact that carbohydrates, and like I said, grains, may be something contributing to an addictive pattern and not really to a vibratory enlightenment.
Sure. I think definitely we have to limit the intake of carbohydrates in general. I don't think, I think it's dangerous that the conventional food and health system seems to want to put those as the very bottom or basis of the pyramid, of the food pyramid. And I've talked about before how I think that is definitely not the case, because it's not something that we need to make the staple of our diet. I've said that the actual living energy that's contained in foods that grow from the earth, that are actually living, like fresh fruits, whole fruits and vegetables, is what we should make the very staple, the basis of the diet, because that's taking in the living energy of the sun. So great call there, Richard. And we don't have any other callers on the line, but the number to join us is 866-841-1065. Once again, the call-in number to join What on Earth is Happening with our special guest, Jay Parker, is 866-841-1065. The lines are open, so call in and I'll put you right through. Jay, let's get back to another healing technique that you wanted to cover, which was EFT, or Emotional Freedom Technique. You want to tell the listeners a little bit about this, because this is not something I've talked about on What on Earth is Happening as of yet, and I want you to break it down and tell people what it is, what it's about, and how you've employed it.
Well, as I've stated previously, two lecturers that I really like, one being Kevin Trudeau, who has his own radio show, quite a few books out there. He's anti-New World Order and anti-Big Pharma, so he's got my vote. But Trudeau talks about, he has a series called Your Wish is Your Command, and it's basically an understanding of human subconscious and your own personal programming. Now, it's very much like The Secret, but The Secret is something where they'll tell you the first 2 methods out of a 5-method belief system, and you're not going to go anywhere with it. But there are some truths in The Secret and in Your Wish is Your Command that are paramount in understanding human psychology. But Bruce Lipton's work, he goes into an 8-hour lecture called The Wisdom of Your Cells. Once a person understands that the first 6 years of their life, they're on complete download programming, they do not differentiate any information coming in whatsoever. They're just making the subconscious processor of their biological computer. That means the first 6 years of your life, you're being completely programmed. Your conscious mind only represents 1% of what's going on in your life. You need to understand that if you got problems in your life, you might want to reprogram. And EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, is a reprogramming of the subconscious.
I personally cannot recommend Kevin Trudeau and Bruce Lipton highly enough. These are two individuals people really need to understand. That series that you talked about, Your Wish is Your Command, is invaluable. People really need to check it out. Listen to what Kevin Trudeau is saying. Understand some of the sources that material came from as well, and who's using those techniques. And check out Bruce Lipton's work on genes and behavior.
Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. This is What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're talking with special guest Jay Parker on this 100th episode edition of What on Earth is Happening about healing techniques for satanic ritual abuse, psychological, mental, physical, emotional. Jay, we're talking about an emotional healing technique known as EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. You were setting that up, telling people that they need to really discover some of the work on law of attraction that Kevin Trudeau has done, and also some of the work that the former cell biologist Bruce Lipton has done regarding behavior, environment, and genes, and his work like the wisdom of your cells and biology of belief. Now, transition that into talking about emotional freedom technique and what that actually is, why that research of Trudeau and Lipton is important regarding that, and let us know what EFT can actually do in a person's life. And I know that you've used it to great benefit.
Well, my favorite, there's an entire new psychology that's known as energy healing. And basically, most of them, and there are quite a few different varieties. There's touch and breathe. There's Psyche. There's emotional freedom technique, which I find to be the easiest and simplest to do. But basically, you would form a thought in your mind as to a negative belief or a feeling you have, or it could be anything, but you put something in your mind and then you tap on acupressure points in your body while saying a phraseology that will help you to heal or deal with the trauma or the fear that you have. And one of the reasons I really like EFT is you just go to Amazon, put in EFT, and there's a bunch of books on how to do it properly. Gary Craig is a person I really respect when it comes to EFT. There have been EFT counselors that have dramatically healed post-traumatic stress disorder war veterans in VAs in the space of 2 or 3 days, taking people who are literally basket cases emotionally and getting them to a point of emotional healing over the trauma that they went through in war. And EFT has a post-traumatic stress disorder book out there.
Tell us about what EFT actually is. Like, what is the technique that is used in it?
Well, what had happened was there was a psychologist in Los Angeles by the name of Callerman. And Callerman was treating a woman who had a severe phobia of water. And he was also at the time studying some Asian medicine and acupressure and acupuncture. And he decided one day when this woman came over for her session with him, and he had been working with her for years over her phobia on water. And he decided, just as I'm beginning to talk to her, I'll just tap on an acupressure point on her collarbone and say to her, don't worry about the water's fine, you know. And what had happened by accident, it's subconsciously reprogrammed her, and she immediately ran into his backyard and stuck her feet in his pool. And this is a woman that would literally have a heart attack if she got near a pool. And so Callerman understood that he had discovered something, and so he kept doing investigation and research, and from his investigation, he came up with the energy psychology healing technique, which Gary Craig went to Callerman and developed EFT.
So to be clear, it's tapping on different pressure points in the body while sort of repeating, I guess either aloud or to yourself, some sort of a mantra that you're going to change a behavior or a belief that you don't particularly like about yourself, or an aspect of the self.
There is a setup that one does, and let's say your fear is rats, and you would say to yourself, while tapping on a particular acupressure point, you would say, I have no more fear of rats. Rats don't scare me. And then as you go through the entire gamut of pressure points, you would say, let's say the word rats. And you would do this several times, and basically you can go online and see Gary Craig's YouTube videos where he demonstrates emotional freedom technique in action. And all I can say is, I've spent a lot of time with different psychologists in my life, and I can say for myself that EFT has been a really wonderful technique for me, because not only do I start clearing away the baggage of my personal trauma, but it also brings out of my subconscious other issues that my mind wants to get rid of. So I'll do an EFT session with myself based on some things I went through in the SRA, and other issues will come to my mind, and I'll tap on those issues, because EFT has the ability to really bring out of your subconscious deep hidden issues.
And I think it's more than just a belief in the mind that doing that is going to make a difference, like the actual tapping. I think it's actually redirecting energy from these pressure points. I mean, about the system of acupuncture and other healing traditions that use pressure points in order to release certain energies in the body, or redirect the flow of energy in the body. So I think there's something physically, tangibly to this technique that actually makes it a viable solution and makes it actually work. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I've been doing, and you know this about me, is I'll listen to interviews on Red Ice Radio, and if I like something, I'll get the book and I'll read it. Red Ice Radio, Camelot Productions. I'm constantly on the web feeding my mind a varied diet. I'll even listen to people I don't particularly agree with, because I want to sharpen my mental ability to sift truth from fiction. Okay? And I realize from listening to your work, Mark, that we're here as conscious beings to learn and to grow. And we're not here to sit in front of a television and eat aspartame poison.
Exactly. And what you're saying makes a really valid point. Something that I try to continuously reinforce is that we really do need to be eclectic about our information gathering. We can't limit our scope. We have to take in information from an extraordinarily wide variety of sources and then boil it all down, to as you've said, hone our ability, our mental ability to try to separate truth from fiction. And that is part of why we're here, because that process is what helps us to grow as human beings in consciousness. So extremely valid point. Jay, I know something that's really near and dear to your heart that we could do an entire show on if you're through basically saying what you wanted to regarding EFT. And I love all the names that you've dropped during the show. These are people that I also highly respect and think everybody should really look into their work and get some of their books and other materials, because they've put out such an extraordinary amount of information that is for the betterment of humanity. But let's talk a little bit about Organite and the work of Wilhelm Reich and the work of people who have come forward with how to make Organite with everyday materials. I know this is something that you do, and this is a form of radionics, is it not?
Yes. Wilhelm Reich was murdered by the FDA in 1956. And basically he was a psychologist, a medical doctor, An amazing, honest scientist. But Wilhelm Reich used to make these large boxes, let's say 4 foot by 5 foot, where a person could sit inside the box, and it was basically panels of inorganic and organic material put together, and people would sit inside these boxes of fiberglass and steel wool and be healed.
Amazing. And that's simply from, again, the redirection or transmutation of energy that was made possible by this form of technology. We're going to talk a little bit more about orgonite on the other side, orgone energy in general, and orgonite specifically on the other side of this break. We're coming up to another break, and we'll come back with the last segment of What on Earth is Happening for this 100th episode. Welcome back, everyone. This is the final segment for this edition, this 100th edition of What on Earth is Happening. Now, before we get back into it with our special guest, Jay Parker, I just want to tell everyone I am going to begin a new podcast page. I'm going to keep 100 podcasts in the archive on this page that I have now going. And then when we go to podcast 101 next week, I am going to start a new page. So be aware that none of the podcasts will be taken down next week. I'm just beginning a new page, and then you'll need to click next page to see the rest of the archive. This is just so that the page doesn't get, really, really huge and big and cause loading problems for some people on slower connections. So, just be aware of that, and I'll remind everyone of that next week as well. So with that being said, let's go back to Jay Parker, who was talking about orgone energy, some of the discoveries of Wilhelm Reich, and orgonite in general. Jay, tell us what the fundamental difference between orgone energy and orgonite is, and who basically is the main inventor of orgonite itself.
Well, Wilhelm Reich... he died in 1956 in Lewisburg Penitentiary on trumped-up charges from the FDA. But he was a protege of Sigmund Freud. When it comes to the great scientists in Europe of the 30s, Wilhelm Reich was one of these men. You can also look at... we like to talk about this era, the 20s and the 30s, where some of the greatest geniuses that ever walked the face of the earth got shafted by the New World Order system. Wilhelm Reich is one of those great minds. Royal Raymond Reich is another great mind that got shafted by the New World Order system. And there was one more person. I think his name was Tesla.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, and so when you look at what these three men, Wilhelm Reich, Nikola Tesla, and Royal Raymond Reich, were attempting to do for society in the 20s and 30s, and the answer that this evil society gave those men, we would live in a totally different world had these men been honored. But as far as orgonite, I'm a member of a group here in Philadelphia called the Free Your Mind Conference, and one of my partners in Free Your Mind Conference, the executive producer, Michael Falsetta, and we have a little orgonite partnership here in Philadelphia. So we make a lot of pendants, we make pyramids. Basically, the technique of orgone accumulation that Wilhelm Reich discovered with his layers of fiberglass and steel wool panels. Reich discovered that throughout the entire universe, there is life force energy, and he termed this orgone energy. And he found that if you simply took organic and inorganic materials and place them next to each other, it would accumulate this naturally flowing
in alternating layers. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay.
Now, what I do,
it would direct this life force energy in like a certain direction, or accumulate it. actually amass it in a certain location.
Yeah, the orgonite devices I make, as far as the science that I know, they not only accumulate and broadcast positive orgone energy, but they also transmute negative orgone energy. There's actually a yin and yang energy system that we're a party to here.
Very interesting. Now, who developed the technique of modern orgonite? Wilhelm Reich is basically the discoverer of this form of life force energy referred to as orgone. But who started with orgonite itself?
Well, Wilhelm Reich had in Maine a institute of research and study in his psychology and physiological work. A lot of people were proteges of his, and so it just was a naturally occurring thing that if you had organic and inorganic panels and you made boxes out of them, what would happen if you took metal, which is inorganic, and organic fiberglass resin and made a 50-50 mix? Would it have the same orgone accumulator effect? And they found that it did. And then people started, energy sensitives started to realize that if you added quartz crystal and other gemstones, you could even enhance the property of the energy coming through.
And who are some of the people that are pioneers in that work?
If you just do a Google search on orgonite and or on YouTube, and you'll find many people. But my favorite, the man who introduced modern orgonite portable devices to me, of course, is Don Croft. And Don Croft is his website is ethericwarriors.com. And ethericwarriors.com is probably the worldwide headquarters of modern orgonite gifting throughout the world.
Some people will remember back before the Free Your Mind conference when we had a little contest that I did on the question of the mystery traditions, and the prize was an orgonite pyramid. Jay was actually the maker of that pyramid, and his techniques have actually even been refined since then. I'm sitting here in the room with 3 pieces of orgonite right here now as we speak, but Jay's modern techniques that he's using to create orgonite are absolutely fantastic, and he does a great job with them. And it's all done with very positive intentions and positive high level of consciousness put into the work. So, Jay, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for the last few minutes, and you could say anything you want about what people can do to help heal from the type of traumatic ritual abuse that they may have gone through, and what we need to heal as a society in general. The floor is yours to take the show out.
Well, Mark, I just want to congratulate you on your 100th show. And I can't stress enough how much your friendship has meant to me over the years in actually healing. Some of your work on natural law has been greatly beneficial to my heart and mind, because one of the things abusers do is they take away your rights and they tell you that you don't deserve anything. And natural law and good philosophy tells you that you're part of nature and that you belong here, and it's a good thing. I've been gifting orgonite with Michael Falsetta for quite a while now. I guess we're over a year now, and we're hitting energy vortexes and different ley line configurations in the Philadelphia region, trying to do our part to fight back the cell tower radiation, which is turning people into zombies. As far as healing from SRA, you need to do EFT, because I've sat with and paid a high price, and I've sat with satanic ritual abuse counselors, and It's a good thing when you find a good SRA counselor, but they're few and far between in the traditional psychiatric world. And if you want to alleviate the pain and suffering of waking up from severe abuse, EFT is your ticket out.
Fantastic. Jay, always a pleasure to have you on the show, and just can't thank you enough for your convictions and for putting this information out there for people. That's what it's ultimately all about, ladies and gentlemen. We can go through our experiences, but how we ultimately face them and then share that experience with other people is what's going to define us as a human being. And that's ultimately what's going to determine whether we get out of this current situation that we're in human consciousness or not. Okay, so it's all about putting that information out there for other people. And Jay, once again, I want to congratulate and applaud you for doing that for the listeners of this program. That's all the time we have for this edition of What on Earth is Happening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you all for listening, and I'll see you here at the same time next week right here on Oracle Broadcasting. Stick around. Chris Everard is up next.